First, I would like to start off with an acknowledgement of country. And where I'm positioned here, I acknowledge and pay respect to the Witjabel people of the Bundjalung Nations, on whose land we work, meet, and study. And we recognize the significant role the past and future elders play in the life of the university and our region. We are mindful that within and without the concrete and steel of buildings, the law always was and always will be Aboriginal land. A couple of words to Future Earth Coast, the what, the why, and the how. Future Earth Coast is a global research program under the Future Earth umbrella that seeks to support sustainability and adaptation options to global change in the coastal zone. As said, it's a core project of Future Earth, which was established to provide knowledge and support to accelerate the transformation to a more sustainable world. So our goal, in short, is to support society towards the transformation for a sustainable and resilient future, and for society and nature on the coast by facilitating innovative, integrated, and impactful knowledge mobilization. The focus of our activities rests on 4 hotspots of change. Firstly, these are islands at risk, urbanization in coastal zones, the Arctic coast, and river mouth systems, deltas, and estuaries. Overall, we provide a platform for, firstly, networking to bring together stakeholders interested in coast and global environmental change. We support co-design and co-production approaches of knowledge formation to find integrative and solution-oriented responses to coastal sustainability issues. We support extra value or adding value to existing research program and disciplines by fostering a transdisciplinary dialogue. And that is our last aim, to promote this dialogue between different stakeholders, scientists, governments, civil society, research funders, and the private sector. And today we are pleased to hear from Daniel Rodgers, who is the Managing Director of Jeremy Benn Pacific here in Australia, about his thoughts on nature-based solution and implementation of climate change adaptation projects in the Indo-Pacific. Over to you, Dan. Also, please, this webinar is recorded, and we invite any question and answers in the chat function. Thank you.
Thank you, Anya. All right, is this one coming through, Anya?
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of this. Very excited to have be able to share some of these projects with the Future Earth Coasts team, and I think I'm more interested in making sure that these presentations are recorded so we can keep adding to the database of information on small island developing states, and have a library of these sort of talks on the Future Earth Coasts website as well. So my name's Dan Rodgers. I'm a technical director with JBP, or Jeremy Benn Pacific. And the talk I'll do today is on implementation of climate change adaptation projects in the Pacific. I'll be talking about 2 main projects and sharing a lot of the work that has been given into the projects by Kristen Keane and Andrew Small from Environment Pacific, Patrick Fong from Eco Pacifica. They're our Australia-based and Fiji-based partners. The people that we're doing this work for are groups called SPC, SPREP, and the various climate change authorities in country. So I'll just see if I can just remove one thing. Right. Okay, great. Okay, so today we'll be talking about the work that we're delivering, which comes under the Global Climate Change Alliance, And the two projects I'll be talking about is some of the work we've been doing in Vanuatu and Papua New Guinea. We're going to end on I guess the question, why is it these communities that are actually moving past the planning stage and into the implementation phase? And why in Australia and some of these other countries are we still stuck in this planning phase? And is it time to start acting now? So I won't go into too much detail on these larger international programs, and I'll more focus on the work that we're delivering. But you should know that there are some great programs out there. We work under the Global Climate Change Alliance. Everything in this space is very acronym heavy. So it's the GCCA, European Union Initiative. And I think the main thing you have to know is this program is a move to action. So they don't want to see plans upon plans, and instead they want to start having some pilot projects that are in the ground so we can start seeing what's working and what isn't working in relation to climate change. Now, as part of the GCCA, the specific sub-program I'm working on is scaling up the Pacific. So it's focusing on a lot of the islands. They're doing a really good job of sharing out all of the funding and the implementation projects. Multi-year project, there's lots of funding available, but you look at that funding and you think that can't go too far. And what we're finding is we're using this funding to do pilot projects in a lot of these other countries, and with the hope that once we see what actions have the most benefit, they'll be able to then get picked up through other funding opportunities. So why the Pacific? For those of you that don't know, it's definitely one of the most vulnerable to natural hazards, and that's just under a present day climate. So we're looking at typhoons, cyclones, already tidal inundation. So when you then multiply that by climate change, we can see that there are going to be a lot of issues in these areas. Now, first project we'll be looking at is the Tagabi catchment. So that's just to the north of Port Vila in Vanuatu. And really this catchment here is one of the only sources of water in Port Vila, which is the capital of the island. Now, over time, we've seen a lot of removal of trees, lots of sedimentation problems, erosion problems, and that's all leading to poor water quality. And whilst it's great to, that when you think of climate change, just to think of increasing sea levels, what we're finding is the problems are going to be a lot greater than that. It's not only increased inundation, but it's also problems and pressures on food security, water security as well, and disaster management. So this is one of the projects that comes under that water security. So our goal was to implement eco-friendly technology, which is code for very high cost beneficial, sort of low cost even alternatives that we can start doing. So catchment restoration, nature-based resilience, as opposed to stepping in there and building more detention basins. So my summary here on this slide is less time planning, more time doing. It's a bit of a quick way to say that, again, the GCCA program isn't there about plans. We actually want to spend more of the funding implementing the pilot projects. So as a consultant, I was really tasked with how can we really halve, quarter, minimize the time that typical consulting firms do, so that way we can push more of the funding into the hands of the on-ground works. So this is where we started looking around for quick satellite-based tools where we can start prioritizing areas for on-ground works. And we've landed on this NDVI analysis. So this is a way to go and start analyzing satellite bands, and we're looking at, it looks like just a green map on the right here, but what we're actually getting is an index of the reflectance of different light, and we can start classifying this into areas where it's got really healthy vegetation, no vegetation, or even water and bare soil. Now, this is a job that could have taken a long time in the past, whereas now it's these tools are readily available. And if you start doing this for multiple satellite images over a time span of like 10 years, we actually can start subtracting them and tracking where your vegetation's being cleared, and where you should be then able to go and focus restoration activities. So what you can see here is the red areas are areas where there has been that decrease in vegetation, or there's some clouds in the picture where we have to screen out as well. So already this is a great sort of off-the-shelf tool where we can go and find areas for catchment-wide restoration. Now this project, however, we wanted to focus on riparian lands and restoring them. So we've gone towards another tool that we've been building over several years now. Since about at least last 10, we've been developing Pacific-wide flood maps. So these flood maps are actually now available for every single Pacific island. In fact, every inhabited location on Earth now has about 6 flood maps that you can go and find. And we've been finding the 1 in 20-year flood map is a good way to start classifying the most, the riparian areas along the riverbank. So we've used our NDVI analysis to find where is all the where's the vegetation disappearing, and the flood map to intersect and find just the areas, as you can see in the top right, where it's riparian vegetation loss. Now, again, this could have been a 3-month study, whereas these days, you're looking at a 3-day study. And all of those fees that would have went to consultants in the past are now getting channeled into quicker revegetation activities. And we're going past revegetation, looking at other eco-friendly approaches with log jams and natural watercourse management. So that's the first example, just to start you thinking about there's lots of new tools out there to go and help get our nature-based resilient measures up in action. Now, the second case study I'll show you is in Papua New Guinea, where we're doing work in the Karama village, which is literally not on the map. There's 2 aerial images that even show it on Google Earth, so we're in an extremely data poor region. The questions that were posed here were, why is the community eroding? Why is their water turning salty? Why is their food changing? And how can what can they do to start preparing for these natural disasters? Again, following the GCCA approach, we're trying to find quick analysis methods that means we can get feet on the ground over there even sooner. So we hit the first problem that no one could find this village. So we had to send our team out there, and we got these beautiful hand-drawn maps. And they've been coming into our team where we're digitizing them now. So some days it's the best way is just to get someone into the village. Now, answering the first question, why they're eroding, we wanted to screen out, was it hearsay, was it anecdotal information, or is there an underlying problem here? So we've moved to a new tool, and this is a quick way to quantify the erosion. And this is called CoastSat. It's free software developed by the University of New South Wales. And again, it's analyzing this satellite imagery. Whereas before you had to go and hand scan and trace aerial images, we're now able to go and analyze every satellite image. So satellites zipping around twice a week for the last 20, 30 years, and we can now go in there, use some algorithms to figure out what was water, what was land, and we can really develop up a view of, see this coastal spit. Well, there's the thoughts that it was eroding, whereas what we're finding here is it might have actually been a natural breach. As you can see, the water going through there now. So this is actually, this classic longshore sediment transport, littoral drift occurrence. It's a natural process, and what we're finding is your sand spit is building up over time. The sand is going from right to left in this screen, and it's a natural process that at some stages these breaches are going to happen. Now, what's happened is the community has moved into these areas. This is the narrow part here, and they're extremely narrow, and they're now occupying these areas which have breached in the past, and it's a natural process. But now that people are there, it's becoming a problem. Not to mention that they've cleared a lot of mangroves through the areas to use firewood. You can see there's no vegetation almost on this inner bank here. So in some areas, we've got a 2-meter erosion scarp. So really quickly, we can go and see that now that's 80% of the problems here are because of its natural channel migration, but also because mangroves or riparian vegetation have been removed, they've got a lot, they've got a less resilient coastline. So we can use a lot of other tools to go and identify the areas where we need to get these catchment restoration plans going. And out of this project, we're funding a new nursery is going to be developed. We're going to be talking to people about coastal setbacks and other riparian vegetation methods. And now we know exactly where to go and focus our attention. Look, I'll briefly go and mention that there's a lot of work done on mangroves. In the past, we can double up our efforts here by developing some quick numerical models as well to understand how wide and how thick the mangrove, the ideal mangrove colony has to be to knock out the wave energy. Right, why is our water turning salty? This was an interesting one. So we thought we'd go in there and review their water infrastructure, water assets and wells. Now, the first two are quite simple because they don't have any real water infrastructure. And a well, well, they're very shallow, situated in sandy soils, close to other latrines and things like that. But we wanted to go and think, well, if they're turning salty, they must be very close to the tidal plains, and can we go and shift them into new areas? So this time we moved towards a new tool. This is called the Global Surface Water Explorer. Again, it's another free one that everyone can go and have a look at. And this contains, again, satellite imagery analysis, where it's had a look at the last 20 or 30 years of satellites, figured out where the water was in all of the images, and then it's classified them based on their water pixel content. So areas with 0% water must be up above the tidal plains, because all of that satellite images, they've never seen water in those images. Ones that are 100% wet all the time, well, they're completely in the tidal zone. So we can use these maps to go and figure out where the water's been in the past, where the tidal water's been, and then sort of start projecting that forward on where the future tidal plains are going to go to. You start intersecting that with our mud maps and where all the locations of the wells are, and you can see we can start classifying what ones are going to probably start turning salty first and what areas need to be looking towards a new water source. We combine that with our flood maps, which are available for PNG as well, and we can start seeing what ones are really at risk. So that's because there's a whole range of wells in these areas. Some are literally unlined holes in the ground, and some of them are built to different standards with the lip. Some are quite high as well. And each of them have a different standard protection against either salt water or flood water. Can the wells just be rebuilt in other areas? It's not that simple. Lots of customary land rights as well. So we can't just shift everyone uphill in these areas. So we've had to look towards new approaches, and even though they seem really common, rainwater tanks are a great climate adaptation option. Capturing water falling from the sky and not in the groundwater is a new approach over there, and I think increasingly they're going to have to be looking towards rainwater tanks. They come with their own set of problems, of course, but that's where we're now investing rainwater tanks into the village. We've looked at some other options as well. There are some great new technologies out there, but and this would probably fall really well under the GCCA program of implementing some in a pilot fashion. But yeah, there's a couple of other things we're looking at as well. Why is their food changing? For this one, it's quite hard to think, is it anecdotal or is it not? And what we've found is there's a few different reasons why food in these communities may be changing already. And what we've done is go on and use this NDVI assessment again to go and track, is it different vegetation types changing? And is that because of the increased salinity in different areas as well? And we have been able to find good evidence to show that around the villages, there are different vegetation species moving in, which all don't have the same sort of food resource in there as well. So in this area, the mitigation options we're now rolling out is, of course, a recommendation to stop removing mangroves, but also we're thinking about new high-yielding cultivars, ones that can handle the salt content that these areas are going to be increasingly exposed to. And could the villagers start trialing these and see what is working? Now the final one, can they start preparing for larger natural disasters now? Well, there's a lot of really good guidance out there on how to do, integrated vulnerability area assessments. And the United Nations have a great one as well, the Quick Risk Estimation Framework. But at the end of the day, all of this needs to have good hazard mapping. So again, rolling out our flood maps for the region, which we can do, in 30 minutes now at any village, is a really good tool. So we're able to go and look at the larger flood extents, for example, 1 in 1,500, and start planning, well, is that going to be the new 1 in 100 year map? And if so, what areas are going to get cut? What evacuation routes are going to get cut first? Should they be starting to plan new evacuation zones as well? So as a summary, the GCCA program it's a really good program. It has released a new round of funding into the region that's focusing on pilot projects for implementation. And what we don't want to see is all of the funding for implementation being used by consulting planning reports. So a lot of the quick tools that I've been showing you here is one of the ways that we're allowing maximum use of funding for boots on the ground pilot studies. And I think when everyone thinks of climate change adaptation, they instantly think that's going to cost millions. But really, a lot of the nature-based resilience approaches we're using, rainwater tanks, it doesn't have to cost millions. So just starting these programs and getting some small-scale pilot projects in, really, it's a great way to start getting people to think that adaptation doesn't need to cost millions. We're always looking for more people to get in, support these projects and new tools to use as well. So make sure you get in touch. As my email there, and of course it'll be shared along with this presentation for to be saved on the Future Earth Coasts website as well. So thank you, Anya, and the team for organising this. Now I'll try and hand back now.
Thank you, Roger. That was really very inspirational talk. I have a couple of questions myself, but since we have very few visitors, I invite everybody to unmute the microphone and ask questions if you'd like to connect with Dan. I may kick off then with the first question I had in regards to the rainwater tanks. Could you speak a bit more? What was the resistance and what were the challenges in establishing rainwater tanks in these communities?
Sure. Okay. I'll just ask quickly. I think I've stopped sharing my screen, but I've somehow lost you guys now. But yeah, you're not seeing my screen anymore. That's fine.
I can see your screen and your slides. Your slides still, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I don't know how to get off it now. So if there's any way for you to kill my screen sharing, I think I've disabled all the buttons on this side.
Okay.
Look, rainwater tanks. Perfect. Rainwater tanks are one of those ones that looks like a textbook solution, and they're really not. And I think this means this is the reason why you can't just study a lot of climate change adaptation and then think you can roll it out in the field. There's been a previous funding scheme to get rainwater tanks into these villages, the exact village now that we're recommending rainwater tanks. And our guys were shown the rainwater tanks when we were there because they're sitting off to the side, rusting away. So people have purchased them, they've got them to the village, but no one thought to go and engage a builder and actually set them up properly. So funding without thinking about how is this going to go and happen on the ground it's almost useless. These tanks are about 5 years old. So where we say we want to implement rainwater tanks, the funding is more going to go to getting some builders into the community and setting them up properly, so that way they can actually get used. And I hate to think how many sort of similar stories are out there with people, chipping in some funding and thinking they're doing the right thing, but they're not going through and getting implemented. So I think that's the main problem with any sort of infrastructure-based solution.
Hi, Dan. How have you found in the past that changing role of the investment in infrastructure and that implementation? How have you found that sort of maybe being incorporated into what you're doing more as seeing that as a full end-to-end process, and how you start to think about that from the beginning to end? And when you're planning for these projects, is there sort of key steps or stages you really try to map out before getting to that end point?
I think we're always going with a plan. The plan always changes when we get to the village. That's for sure. We had all these ideas for this community and threw them out after we got there. I do really like the approach of the GCCA, where perhaps in the past people have been thinking large scale climate change adaptation. We have to do it. We have to invest. It's going to be big. Maybe that's the reason why it hasn't always worked. Whereas the GCCA starting off small, something that can be easily implemented for 30 grand. I like their new approach. There's less moving parts, there's less logistics, and I hope that this program is going to end up with, instead of one big climate change adaptation program somewhere, you're going to have 30 small scale ones popping up all over the Pacific now, and that can then get used as the planning for the bigger ones as well. Did I half answer your question?
No, it does. I think it sounds like the message of the think global, act local, return to that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah, definitely not going to solve a lot of these problems by pumping millions into one area. Yeah.
Thanks. That was really, really nice presentation.
Thanks.
And is this type of approach first off in the Pacific, or is this modeled in other ocean basins?
Well, I'm not too sure. I was very surprised that I know a lot about the GCCA Super, which is scaling up the Pacific, and I was very interested to see that it goes up higher into that European initiative, the GCCA, that I know very little about actually. So I have investigated a little bit, and they're doing work all over the world. It's just that the SUPA, the Super part, is the patch that we're looking at, I think. But yeah, certainly some of the, I think I showed a picture of some of the solar powered rain. They just look like solar panels, but that's some great technology that's pulling water, moisture out of the air and turning it directly into water. That's being rolled out in a few case studies throughout Africa we're looking at. So no, there's all sorts of international projects. It's just finding the right ones that's going to be applicable for our area, I think.
Then the Viola made a comment in the chat box about being grateful appreciate to share the free tools and resources. How widely known are the resources, or as a follow-up webinar, we could probably look at kind of introducing these free tools to the community of Future Earth Coast? Is that something
that's
of benefit?
Yeah, look, it's something that I've been pretty passionate about in the years. It was 2 years ago, we hosted an Engineers Australia evening just on free software tools. Of course, a lot of the commercial packages don't love us doing that, but look, there's a time and a place. All the commercial packages are great, and we use a lot of them here, but there's equally just as many free cool tools that are coming out now that don't take that much computer power. University of New South Wales is doing a great thing, releasing all of these satellite imagery sort of codes, and they're now just proliferating throughout the industry, and people adding them on and doing different things. I think, the last few years has been amazing in this space, and the more people that are gain awareness of this area, it's even better. And as you know, Anya, we've tried to have a few students go through SCU and focus on implementing these tools, but it's a growing area. We do have to publicize, and then it's probably going to be an even bigger jump getting these tools into the regional Pacific Islands as well, but it can only be a couple of years off. We're right now, we've just started working with the World Bank on a project to make some nicer interfaces that'll feed into these free tools, and that'll remove another barrier, I think.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. That was a really great talk. I guess if there are no further questions, yeah, I really thank you very much for your time and sharing of all your knowledge and wisdom. And I look forward to put this on the website and hope we get collaborative action together in the future.
Absolutely. Great. Well, thanks for the opportunity, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Dan.
No worries.